Hello. Yeah, hi Vardhan.
Yes, Subhash.
Yeah. Just confirming whether I'm audible or not.
Right, right.
Yeah, hi everyone. We'll just give 1 more minute so that folks could join, and we'll start at the in another 1 minute. Okay. So we shall proceed with today's agenda item. So let me share my screen, and we'll start from there. Yeah, I hope my screen is visible. Could someone please confirm?
Yeah, confirmed.
Yeah.
Thank you. So so today is the 18th January, and today I planned of following 2 pointers for our agenda. The first one where we will discuss about the action mechanism for the service assurance. So last time we visited the portion where we were visualizing how the service assurance could be configured, and that loop we started, and how we'll configure the observability, and how we'll collect the some of output stream from the observability or KPI parameters from the observability framework. And also, yeah, there were some comments were there. So like how we'll place our active or action part. So those things also I refined it once again with our last discussion. And the second point where we would like to talk about the observability API. So if any folks from the observability side, if they could just give their thoughts, like how they are proceeding about this API. So that will take as a second point. Okay, and also, please add your name in this attendee list, just to keep track like who is attending. So I'll jump on our first item about the service assurance loop, so that user story we are preparing. So last time we visited up on this flow. I'm putting on a slideshow mode. Okay. Yeah, something happened. Not able to put on slideshow. Okay. I hope it's visible to everyone. Somehow the slideshow is not working for me. This better. Is it visible to everyone, or shall I increase the font size by some way? Okay, I'll try to. Okay. Hello.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good. I can see it.
Okay, fine. So yeah, so last time we started like we were deploying some UPF, and also we were trying to configure the service assurance CR, and we had a lot of comments about this step number 7, where we were configuring the active pod or action pod. And there we were discussing it could be in a workload cluster, or it could be in a management cluster, so that this pod could help us to take some action. So this picture was not much clear. This flow was not much clear to visualize this. So what I did, I have created another flow for this particular step number 7. So so here what was happening? Here we had created the UPF, we configured the service assurance CR, and we were receiving one package, where we were listening on the package revision, and we wanted to inject some kind of observability related CR inside the package. So that was that again, it's like step number 5. So again, we wanted to discuss and debate on the topic of how we'll communicate between service assurance and observability. And further to it, we wanted to create one active pod where the data stream generated from the observability, we can consume it, and then we can take action. So we were in that step. So for that, actually, I created the step number 7. I expanded it. So here, either what I was saying, there could be possible 2 approaches to create a action pod. So like whenever we receive any whenever we wanted to create one action pod, so we will talk to the Qt API server in the management cluster, just to create it here in the management cluster, this action pod. And further, the action pod will receive the data step based on in the previous step. We will configure the the consumer for that data stream, right? So that could be consumed by this action pod. Similarly, suppose you wanted to deploy in the workload cluster, so we could communicate with our Kube API server in the workload cluster and try to create the action pod. Again, yeah, there is some mistake. Actually, I have put like a Kube API server to action pod. It should have initiated from SIG controller. But yeah, this particular step, the create action pod in the workload cluster, it could come from some kind of package, or we need to find some way like how we could request the workload cluster to create this action pod. So that still is like further details are needed on this particular line. But yeah, in a high level, we are willing to create a certain action pod close to the NF, so that we can take any action then and there. So about the action, I'll go deeper in the next slide. But yeah, I expanded the step number 7 just to visualize this aspect, that service assurance controller could create action pod in the management or workload cluster. So just I would like to take your comments here. Do you think this approach is a valid one, or any comments there? Yep. Bim, you have raised your hand. Please go ahead.
So what is the
Yeah.
goal of the action pod itself? Because, okay, so a problem with an intent-based system is that if you have a conflict of action, you will start to oscillate.
Right. Yeah. So actually, yeah.
So that's one statement, right? So I said it last time, and I keep saying the same thing. The SA controller is not one thing; it's distributed amongst various things, and potentially it's part of a controller itself. So it's one element within a controller that is responsible for a certain thing. And if you look at that, then you have to look at it within its context. So the question is then, what is that action pod doing that the rest is not already doing?
Actually, I agree with you. The SA controller could be distributed. Currently, just to further going on the discussion, I just put like it is another controller or operator running there. But yeah, of course, it could be distributed. When we go further on the deeper details for the implementation, definitely we can realize it. But I just putting like it is some module there which has the responsibility to manage or to control the entire loop. So it is configuring the entire assurance loop. So you can visualize in this way. And
then this. So give an example of that. What is an example of this?
Okay, for UPF, we'll just go by the UPF example. So like first we deployed the UPF, right? And we need to configure observability on to it. So the SA control provide that framework where we could configure the observability so that means we can hook on it and say that whenever the load reaches to the 80%, just start giving me the that data stream. And in the same context, I try to bring out this action pod, because I don't want to consume all the data stream directly here in the SA controller. Otherwise there will be a lot of multiple UPFs deployed in a multiple cluster, and all the data stream coming towards to service SA controller. So that could create a bottleneck problem. So what I did, I just created the smaller action pods where we could.
But what is it doing? Just go back to an example. Can you give a concrete thing what an action pod is doing in the context of a UPF?
Okay.
What is the action pod? What is your goal?
Yes. So in the action pod, I'll configure the policy. Suppose just take an example of scaling. So the UPF load got increased to 80%, beyond the 80%. So we received that data stream from the observability about the CPU load on action pod, and action pod is going to take the action to bring down that load by doing the scaling. And again, the scaling could be done by the modifying the package by creating a new package reason. So that could be one approach. And those approach actually
so
I try to
can I stop you here?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we have the autoscaler, the horizontal autoscaler and the vertical autoscaler in Kubernetes. Why are you not using those?
But yes, a certain point is somewhere where we need to configure it, right? So in the package somewhere we need to configure, correct?
Yes, but so that can be, so like the autoscaler, for example. I mean, if I look to this use case, what I would do, right, as part of the original package, which is part of the blueprint, you have an autoscaler, right, which has a parameter. So the autoscaler will be configured. So that, first of all, there is no action pod to be created because you consume something that is already doing the job, right? You just need to basically configure the parameter for it. So in other words, the autoscaler that lives in the workload cluster will be using that parameter and will be configured most likely through the NF deployment, because it's typically a day 0 type of thing. And if you change it, it will be done through the operator.
Okay. But yeah,
so in other words,
yeah.
So in other words, there is no such, so there is no action pod or whatever required to accomplish that.
But yeah, there could be a certain life. I mean, I can visualize like a certain life cycle related activity. For example, I would like to
give concrete examples like the
Yeah.
autoscaler. I don't think you have a good. There is no use case of it. So
okay.
What is a good use case to do it?
Okay. Let's
Vance
say
has his hands raised as well. By the way.
Okay.
I don't know whether he wants to shine in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to understand what the purpose of the action pod is, and so the scaling was a bad example because, as you say, there's already a mechanism for that. But closed loop automation, right? There's all kinds of things that we can't foresee that will need to be done in an assurance context, and we need to be able to deploy those closed loops so that they can monitor performance or resource utilization or whatever, and take actions on that. And so I guess this is where those would be hosted. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'll just go one more example. Like suppose I would like to upgrade my NF. So that is also a life cycle related to NF. It's like when you see the life cycle of NF, you have different phases, right? Like downgrade, upgrade, or backup. So those kind of activities also are there. So action pod could have those kind of workflows. It's what to execute.
Okay, but
right?
sometimes, okay, so in this case, I mean, I'm looking to how we do that, right? It's part of our controller that does it. So there is a specific entity inside of the controller that has responsibility for that.
Right.
So you don't deploy something new. There is just a thing that upgrades.
Yeah, but I think those cases where we require to manage the entire life cycle of NF. So and there are workflows involved there. So in those scenarios, action pod would be having that business logic. Suppose there's a disaster management. If I would like to do it, I need to migrate my NF from this cluster to some different cluster. So definitely I need to take a backup of a DB or move from one cluster to another cluster. Migration need to happen. So those complex business logic could be there.
Now I have a different view on that, if you will, right? On how that was done, because see, okay, so depending on implementation, I mean, it goes into the composition type of a framework that I'm working on, is that you have a bunch of, I'm always liking to thinking about a system where there is one person that does something and is responsible for it and handles that particular aspect of the system, right? So
Right.
think of autoscaler as one of these examples. You have an autoscaler capability. So that is a controller part of the Kubernetes system that handles it, right? And handles something, and it basically takes action of it. So for me, that's a good analogy to reason upon or reason from, right? So in other words, if we say that we, let's say, talk about upgrades and downgrades and doing canary and stuff like that, right? What you see is that, okay, there will be something that needs to handle something. For me, that something will be delivered, and the delivery can be in various forms, right? So it can be a standalone thing, right? But can also be part of an existing system. So like take the autoscaler, it's part of Kubernetes distribution. You get it out of the box, right? You just have to consume it, right? So we have to think, in my view, we have to build the system in the same manner. So in other words, what it means is that the package will not be changed, but you will trigger the instantiation if it's not already there to do that. And so in other words, it's not part of changing a package or something like that. You trigger something that basically handles the instantiation of it such that you can consume it, and the deployment that is depending on it, or the thing or the configuration that is depending on it, will not act unless that is in place.
Okay. Yeah.
So in other words, so in other words, the action pod, as you mentioned, will come in various forms, right? So in other words, in a lot of cases, what you see today, it's already in place. So there will be systems that already are consuming it, in which case you don't have to deploy anything new, right? And there might be cases where you would do something, right?
So if I see it closely, autoscaler could be visualized as a action pod because it is taking action related to scaling. Okay, so this is a one case of it.
Yeah, but I think the name. So what for me is a bit confusing is you call it a pod, or an action pod is in other words, it's not a good name in my view, because in a lot of cases, it's the instantiation of it is not through a pod necessarily. It's there is something that does the job basically, and the instantiation of that is not necessarily a pod. And multiple pods can be part of a system and stuff like that. So I think we have to be, the name is confusing.
Of course. Name, I think we can definitely. I'm open for suggestion. We can modify it, but gist of it is those action related module, right? Those are the dynamic one. Suppose there are some complex business requirement, we can put that business logic, and on a fly we can instantiate it, and it will be keep on monitoring if certain activity or some alarm or some certain condition happen, and it will execute itself. So definitely the autoscaler is one example of it, which does very low level stuff, but we can make it more complex also. That gives the opportunity, and of course this I'm open for the suggestion to change the name. Okay. But Wim, do you agree that it makes sense that we can put this particular business logic in the management cluster, and putting it in a workload cluster also adds the advantage? Because I see that will somehow helping us to react quickly if we put on the workload cluster.
Oh, see, so here is my view, right? So if I look to the service assurance at the top, right? So the guy that instantiates it, right? First of all, there will be multiple entities that do it, right? But what these people say is that they will say, okay, what they will focus on what they want to, so they will express their intent from an assurance point of view, if you will, right?
Right.
And they have to communicate with someone, right? And there will be an entity that is acting upon that, let's say, on that intent.
Yeah.
And that has to be communicated somehow, right? So that is basically what we are discussing here.
Mhm.
And so we have to segment the thing in those let's say philosophy or whatever is a better way of saying it, but because otherwise everything is glued together. So we have to I think it's important to segment the thing in, so you have the upper layer which basically says, okay, this is what I want to do, and then where it happens and what it exactly does to achieve that thing is not necessarily a matter of the upper level system. It can delegate it towards a more distributed entity that does the job.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. It's like scaling related things we can run on the workload cluster directly, or yeah, package related some business logic we can put it in the management cluster, and they can take a one coordinated approach also. They can coordinate and work together on the management, right? Or I'm going some it's like a different direction from your thoughts. Vim, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I hope everyone is clear that we can have this action pod, this alternate name we can put it. This action pod we can have in a management cluster as well as in a workload cluster. I think that agreement actually I'm looking for from everyone. If they have any thoughts, they could open actually.
I would call it a controller or
Yeah, I would do the same thing. It's an action controller.
actor. It's an actor. It's an actor
Okay.
or a controller at the end of the day. That's what I would call it.
Okay, sure. Okay. But yeah, everyone I think agree. It could have the role in the management as well as in workload cluster. So if that agreement, I'll go ahead further. Okay, so I'll move to my next slide. So like what we decided, like currently it is an actor, that action pod I have written it. So I was looking for a different kind of action that we could take it. So some three approaches actually I have written here. Miss, what kind of action or what kind of things we could do actually, and certain scenario we cannot do it. So what could be alternate? So that question actually I would like to ask to everyone also. So here I'll start from the actor, which are written as an action pod. It is consuming the data stream coming from the observability. Okay, and based on that, those KPI parameters, it is trying to do some kind of configuration on the NF. So the first approach what I have written, and yeah, of course, this actor could be in a workload cluster or in the management cluster. So here the dashed line I have just drawn to show the management cluster and workload cluster. So between the workload cluster and management cluster, there's a GitIA. So the actor could bring modification on the package, and that package could be synced on the workload cluster. So we need so the actor would create one new package revision. Okay. So I'll just complete all the three, and let's see that it's like what could be a better approach, or what alternate we could think. Okay. So this approach I have taken like to modify the package, and the package will get synced on the workload cluster. And as Veem suggested, it is not a good approach to modify the package because it becomes thicker and thicker. We should try to create some alternate package. That is also one possibility. And the second approach where I talk about operators should allow certain operation, example execution of the workflow. So what I put like there is a free 5GC operator running on the workload cluster, and currently it just take the UPF deployment, AMF deployment, and it deploy there in the workload cluster. But whether it's possible that the operator itself open up some API or some kind of possibility to hook the business logic there, and it could be executed on the case of life cycle management of the NF. For example, take a backup of NF or upgrade, downgrade. So those kind of hook point, if it opens up, or it allows us to modify certain parameters. But here I see the challenge, because if we modify the content of the deployment here, it won't be in a synced with Git. Yeah. So again, the reconciliation will take place and our configuration will get invalidated in this scenario. And the third one, where I was thinking that somehow we directly modify certain parameters on the NF. But again, we will lose the inconsistency. We will lose the consistency between package and the deployed state. So this multiple problem I'm seeing it. So I just wanted to take your thoughts, like what do you think our best approach we could take to apply to actor could apply certain action on the NF, or what exactly we can do to reconfigure the NF or day 2 activities on the NF. So any thoughts on it? Wim, could you suggest something?
I mean, so first of all, like I take autoscaler, right? Replicas, right?
Yeah.
It's a parameter that you can delegate. So I always like to think about the fact that there is one element responsible for one thing, right? And he acts upon it. If you have two people doing that, you will create issues, right? So you'll get oscillation and all of that stuff, right? So in other words, I mean, if you look to like replica sets in autoscaling, right? What it means is you basically, there is a number in the deployment that will be owned by someone, right? So in other words, Git shouldn't care about that parameter, right? It should know what it is, right? And potentially understand the deviation, but doesn't act upon the change, right? Because the actor is someone else, right?
Right.
And so that is, I think, if you have that philosophy, it would, I think, you can find a pattern that is reusable and doesn't conflict, because that's a problem with intent, right? So the problem with intent is that if you have one guy master of everything, you will never be able to do anything unless you go via that person, right? So you have to segment and delegate some of these things to other people, right? And build it in such a way that you can allow delegation, because if you really want those very, let's say, high scale or very, let's say, rapid or reactive closed loop systems, you need to delegate that to as close as possible to where the action is happening, meaning the workload cluster. And as a result, for example, take that replica example, you can allow for to delegate that. Now, what typically happens, right? So what typically happens is that, so that operator that you draw, right, has these service assurance controllers embedded into it.
Okay.
So in other words, the operator itself that you draw here is not one thing. It's actually multiple things, of which, let's say, upgradability and stuff like that. I mean, if you look to our solution, that's part that it is a controller specifically focused on upgrades. That is a controller specifically focused on canaries. That is a controller specifically focused on downgrades or backups and stuff like that, right? So there's all distinct entities that do one thing and one thing very well. And if someone else needs to consume it, you basically call the person or that thing, and then it will do the job for you, right? So, and as such, you build this responsibility system on which you can apply that intent-based behavior, because that entity is always in sync with itself, right?
Yeah, Wim, but here actually, I don't know, Miss, I had this impression I could be wrong also. Like when we modify NF, or let's say if I stop this NF and do something, still Gitea has the package revision, right, and config sync continuously syncing on it, and 3.5GC operators trying to deploy the instance of the NF, right? So these two are the conflicting systems. So how we could resolve it? Yeah.
So that's the action on the operator itself, right? So the operator itself will have to take care of that conflict, right? Because he is the ultimate person responsible for something, right?
So the second approach where I'm saying that operator should open a certain kind of API possibility or operation. Is it the right approach?
Now I think today we have very bad. We don't have a good use case, but I can explain you some of the. Let's take Yang, right?
Okay.
Because I'm working on, so you will soon see something popping up there. But so the approach that we take is this, right? So let's say your configuration is a configuration of a network function, right?
Okay.
So let's say you use Yang to communicate with the device, right? And so from Gitea, basically someone says, what is a good example? Number of subscribers is 10,000, right?
Right.
And
okay.
Actually, it's not a good example.
Okay, let's take it.
Think about you basically say a parameter will be configured as A, right?
Okay.
But then someone else basically configures parameter B. Okay.
Right.
And so the way that we solve that is the system allows to define priorities, right, on that particular path or leaf.
Okay.
And you will be reported which one is active, right? And so you will know at all time who is winning or who is actually has achieved the job and why, right? So in other words, if you got overruled by something that was a higher priority than you, then you will not act upon that deviation, if you will.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah, Yang actually has this that capability. Like you can put priority, but
no, we built that in the controller itself, right? So we made it in such a way to avoid that conflict. But that is a mechanism to achieve that, and you can still get a fully intent-based system that achieves it, but you will see deviations appear.
Right.
That's a mechanism to resolve it.
Yeah, but also I would like to keep this packages synced with those changes. So any back propagation we can do it.
So in that example that I was saying, let's say you will be informed on there is a deviation, right? And then you can do something with it, right? You can either accept it and then take it into account, or you can say, no, I don't like it, and then you do something about it. Or you can try to do something about it. So that's the flexibility that you then get with it.
Okay, so if I understand from your example, so some part of SA related logic we need to build on the 3.5GC operator, so that we could create the idea of prioritization or conflict management. So those stuff we could do it here, right?
Yeah. So this works. So like Verada or who is it says that service assurance can be different from someone else. So this works, right? Because you can have an action from service assurance and a vendor basically does another configuration. And so both will be informed. So the priority on which your intent applies will dictate on what will win, right? And then if the priority is the same, then you have a rule of order that does the job, right? So, but that is a mechanism to do so. So in other words, you can decouple and decompose it the way you want.
Okay. And what is the problem if we take the approach one is like let's take a package for single source of the truth, and all the communication happens over the package, and everything will be captured inside the package. So what do you think? The first approach, which actually
so it's going to be slower, right?
Yeah.
So you have to. So that's why I think we always have to segment. The speed is also important, right? Of course, I think we should try to go always via the same mechanism, right? But you know that the system where you put it in Git and you have a review and you have an approval and so on and so forth is going to take time, right? So this is typically for changes that are, I would say, not so real time focused, right? So this is really for things like, okay, I want to do this, I want to deploy that, and so on and so forth. But then you have, you could say, the real-time actions, if you will, right? So more the real-time nature of the service assurance. In that case, going via the approval approach or the version controlled and the source, keeping the source of truth always in sync, is slow, right? So slow is not, it doesn't have to be slow, but it's not like 1 microsecond. You're not going to react in a microsecond or something like that, or a millisecond or a second or something like that. So in other words, you keep the so going through that flow, in my view, you typically do for, hey, I want to deploy a new service, or I want to change something. So this is for rather substantial changes, like more for the zero instantiations or changes to an instantiation that are planned, right? But then the real-time nature happens. If you can go through the same flow, by all means, right? Because it's always better to have one communication channel. But I'm afraid that it's going to be too slow for a real-time service assurance element.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah.
I don't know, there's people raising their hand.
Yes, Varda, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's a quite interesting discussion. See, what happens when when the free 5GC operator or the operator finally resolves that okay, it's not the parameter A from GitHub, but it's B as per the new dynamics. What if another edge comes? Okay, parallelly, a new site comes. They might take the old value of parameter A to GitHub and try the same thing, repeat the same thing.
So there will be a communication channel back, I think, for that, right? So in all, what I'm trying to say, right? So let's, for the sake of discussion, I think, take this slide and let's assume that you have Git, right, doing A, which is basically your source of truth, and then your observable or action pod, if you call it, your actor changes the value, right? Okay. And the actor is living on the workload cluster, whereas Git is on the management cluster. Let's take that example, because I think that's the most realistic for now, right? So now they are in conflict, right? So in what I try to explain, Git side will know about the change, but will not do anything. So in other words, if he deploys site number 2, it could apply the new parameter, or it could do the thing as before, and so on and so forth. But in other words, if the parameter has to be accepted as a new change on the system, most likely it will go via the Git flow. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, in that case, but your point is also right, Wim. See, it's going to be slower if everything is via the Git way. So, kind of, whether we need both, updation via 2 and in the background 1 for new sites, something like that.
Yeah, I think, I will always like to build a uniform system that always is the same, right? So in other words, you deploy the same as site 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Now here, in your example, I think you basically said site 1 is, let's say site 1 and 2 is deployed, site 1 observed something and he changes, right? Now the question is then that change, is it applicable to the other sites or is it unique to that particular thing? So that's one aspect. And so if it is, let's say, applicable to all the other sites, most likely you will have to go via Gitty workflow, in my view, because that means that that change is going to be tested and validated by someone before it gets applied. But in the meantime, you'll have this local service assurance that lives on cluster 1, 2, 3, and 4 that will most likely go and also suggest the same thing as the first cluster did, right? If it sees a similar problem. Right. So the question is it not better to do something like that initially, right? To have each of these workload clusters be able to act independently, and then based on the information you have, that's kind of how a typical SDN system works, right? You monitor the result from an aggregate point of view to do then more system-wide or cluster-wide changes, right? And these, the life cycle of both of these happen through a different time window.
Right, I agree.
Does it make sense?
Yes, yes, perfect.
And then you build like a uniform system, right? You have something in the workload cluster, it's always doing the same thing, it has a certain business logic which does the same thing, right? And it will act based on it. And then the aggregation back to the management system will happen at due time when, because if it's only one cluster that does this and the other 3 doesn't, then we might as well, maybe this is something very specific to that cluster, which maybe not affect 2, 3, and 4, and that has to be investigated most likely.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. I try to keep it simple and always the same is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so we have our last 15 minutes. So that I would like to give for the observability related discussion. So as Stephen is already here, so I just would like to take this chance to him to just talk about the observability, like means what API progress you are seeing, or how we could help there to bring out this use case. Stephen, if you would like to take.
Yeah, so a couple of things, right? We don't know. that's a simple answer. We don't know. But then the idea is obviously we are not. Well, the CLDs would not be vendor specific. So if, for example, you wanted to subscribe to free 5GC stats pertaining to a UPF instance, interpreting those metrics outside of the fact that obviously the operator would know how to interpret that would not be something observability would do. Basically, we'll create things as much as possible to expose that metrics to a collector. We will ensure that the access of those store metrics or traces or whatever would be enforced, meaning that we would only give accessibility to a certain set of people that are set up by the administrator. But then in terms of like the data lake side, on the management cluster side, basically, we are at this point anyway, we aren't thinking of able to interpret vendor specific stuff. There are, so the one way to kind of go around that, of course, is we are collecting aggregating statuses based on Nephew specified CLDs. So the status of resource of our Nephew CLDs would have something, which very limited right now. Obviously, just conditions right now. But if we want to enhance that, therefore we would standardize a set of with statuses to reflect what is going on right now and why you say certain things are not working, then I could see that as something that Netflix standardized. But obviously, individual metrics, traces, and things are not something that we would create an Netflix observability language where you can query, because we're not in that business. And another thing that we could do for sure, based on the current set of CLDs, everything is driven by the units of how we operate, based on our custom resources, in Netflix specific custom resources. Right now, our custom resource are defined on a per instance, network function instance basis. We have basically a domain orchestrator right now, right? So one instance of UPF, for example. So I could see us being smart enough to group all the visibility data into associating with a particular instance. We can also timestamp them. But then again, the specific interpretation of the metrics, we won't be able to do beyond what Netfield may be defining, and then each of the network function operators would be responsible to set a status or expose whatever. I mean, it doesn't need to be just status, but probably for the time being, just status of resources to expose. But then, so observability has two pieces. Has a piece where it collects the relevant informations that would be exposed on an OTel interface, and then we'll be able to collect them. We hopefully would be. So we talked about that last week. We would like the workload cluster operators be able to subscribe to things through the observability framework. Although those are opaque to us, so that if they get 3.5GC has no metrics, so that's a bad one. But let's say Ericsson or Nokia UPF specific metrics that they define, the operator knows what they are, and they can specify that. But then we have a framework that should be to allow them to be able to subscribe to get those statuses as they come in, not statuses, visibility data as they come in. And then, as we talked about, there will be a data lake that allows that are basically more for access control, if anything.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Stephen, I'm sorry. I before we get into just the details of it. So if I look at Subash's, I just need to get verification. If I look at Subash's framework here, he expects the output of the observability framework to be a recommendation that's actionable, right? So does that mean that everything else, which includes the collection, the analysis, and the recommendation formation, is done in observability?
No.
That's my
fear, guys.
For sure, we're not thinking about doing that.
I understand. I'm just trying to figure out architecturally, guys. We've got, the only handoff that I've seen so far, and I might be wrong, is the recommendation comes from the observability framework, and I'm like, okay.
No. That's wrong in my view. I think observability should only be about what to observe.
Not arguing. In other words, I'm just saying what was being presented here, right? I just want to make sure, guys, that there's a handshake before we get into the minutia of what the observability framework is. What is the handshake between observability and the service assurance?
Right. Is my screen visible?
My take, if I may, in words, right, is that observability as an API to say what people can observe. Nobody should care how it is done, right? And it will report upon that request. At the moment, the format in which we report is OTel. Stephen, is that fair?
Yeah.
And then the actor, right? So in other words, when you do so, the service assurance will get a set of information. At the moment, the format is OTel, and based on that, it can do recommendations or actions and stuff like that, right? So I think that should be the system. That's how I mentally think about the system that we have
It
discussed.
was the way I saw it, but that's not the way it was shown here because we're showing actions being taken without understanding the information, right? And creating the recommendation and then acting upon the recommendation, right? And so
yeah. So
I think
yeah, in a way, the best we could do is there are things that we define as a community of that where I don't even in a way I don't even know if we'll be smart to do that. Meanings that, for example, for a concrete example, right? So can you set something like by saying, oh, this current UPF would not be able to handle a particular capacity requirement. So if we enforce that off of operator, or do we, and then that's because of, say, CPU problem, we would not be able to reflect that very easily, other than operator would have to tell us that they understand they wouldn't be able to handle this, and whether or not this is related to a particular times thing, in terms of like infra stats that came in. Whether or not we do that association by itself is always something that we can think about, but in terms of getting the data and analyzing it, it's definitely something on the higher layer for sure.
Yeah.
exactly.
But I think,
and I just think
Stephen,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Wim.
No,
Yeah,
go ahead, Tim.
No, I
What I
think
was-
Wim, you and I are on the same level, so same thought pattern. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I was trying to say is this, right? So the problem that Stephen is highlighting here, right? In my view, that's why I mentally today, most of these, so it is a controller that acts at the moment, typically the vendor or some vendors supply those, right? Today is a big management system, going forward as a distributed controller, right? But typically that controller will get metrics from observability, right? And will do the closed loop. So that controller typically has the intelligence to know, okay, I cannot do this, right? So you ask me to do this, it will not do it because it has the intelligence. Now, can you make that generically? Probably yes, right? If you get enough data. But that's why we should not in Nephew care how it is done, right? We should just inform about the mechanism that we need to accomplish a certain mission, right? And then how it is being implemented and stuff like that is not our problem, but it's actually someone else's problem.
So
Whether
what
it's a
we're
vendor
saying,
or
what we're
sorry.
saying is that the analysis and recommendation formation is a fuzzy area, right? A fuzzy club, but it's a fuzzy area,
No, it's
right? So
in my view, it's
and-
not fuzzy. It's part of the service assurance controller, if you will, job,
okay,
right? Because see,
all right.
in my mental model, I segment it in two pieces. You have observability, and so the reason why I want to segment it into two separate pieces is the following: if service assurance needs to care about how they collect the metrics and stuff like that, right? The service assurance becomes like a Swiss Army knife, right?
So
in other words,
Bash, that means the Bash's interface from observability is to the service assurance controller only, right?
right. So
For what
Bash
we're doing.
is talking about the service assurance. So I think we talk about different systems somehow. So maybe let me take a draw IO. It's probably
obviously observability could be servicing something other than service assurance. We are just collecting metrics and data and
I'm
things,
just
and then
talking about
some
in terms
high level
of
application
assurance.
would consume that. Service assurance
That's right.
being one of them. So enforcing a service level is purely a service assurance problem. So obviously that language, how policy is exposed, has almost nothing to do with the observability piece. We as Nephew observability operates on what Nephew understands, and we won't understand actually in the vendor specific stuff too. So we'll ask vendors to also expose them basically through OTel interface. And then in terms of, so those things are now available, and we give subscription frameworks and all that stuff. Even if you want alarm setup. So for example, if a status change, we'll be able to alert the applications that are interested. So we can support that. But in terms of taking all that, so we'll provide that data, analyzing it, whether or not that fits into the service. Forget about taking action for now, but just see whether or not the service is healthy. It's not. It seems like it's a service. It's a high level application problem. So observability is not, a marker that tells you, oh yeah, for this topology intent, this is actually how this is working. No, we don't. We have no idea.
Yeah. So I'm trying to draw a picture here quickly, right?
Okay.
Just to get it, because I think it's always better to make a picture. So this is an entity X, right? I don't care what it is, and it may not be one but multiple, right? So the service assurance will say to the observability, I want to look at these things, right? Mm-hmm. He will start to collect it. I draw the data collection side on a different angle. They can be collocated, but most likely they are separated, right? Because this is Prometheus and this is a controller probably, right? As an implementation. Mm-hmm. So he will, the SA will most likely poll in the case of Prometheus, but okay, I draw here a thing. Then here there is a business logic, right? That I don't know how to draw yet, but let's call it a bubble, right? That uses that data or various data, and he comes up with an action, and then
Wim, are you drawing?
Are you sharing some screen?
We're not seeing anything. That's what I was like going. What are you drawing, Wim?
I could see Wim's face.
Yeah, there's another screen here.
I'm sharing my screen. Yeah.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Yeah.
Now I see it.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, now, yeah, sure.
So here, so what I was trying to explain is we have a service assurance. I call this the actor, if you will, right? So this is the thing that is acting, right? Because you can have a system on top that tells what he is supposed to do. He will say to observability, I want this. He goes to the system or multiple systems, right? But I just drew it for simplicity one. He starts to collect information. It goes to a data system that gets the information because observability will just take care about how to instantiate. Maybe he will add something here to do it, right? But that's not the problem of this, not the business of the service assurance to look at that. Then data will get collected. The service assurance actor will see it. He has some business logic, right? Which basically says, here are the rules. And then he will take an action. And the action could go somewhere else, but for the sake of discussion, could also go via an intermediary, right? So either, let's say this guy will then say, based on the business logic, now I want this to change. And it either can go this way, or it can go straight to something. It can act. So this is the action, if you will, right? So that's kind of for me the loop that we are talking about. Does it make sense, or?
Actually, thank you, Wim. You covered my mental model also. So I'm happy that means I'm able to convey the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought this data also is a part of observability. Observability will give back to SA.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
But it can be separate. It doesn't have to be part. So for me, observability is not one big blob, right? You can have a controller that says, okay, I want these metrics to be collected. It will go and dictate the system on it. And then the data will stream via a data lake, right? If you will. But they can also be combined, right? I just segmented it for, I think it's easier to draw it like this because they don't have to be combined, is what I'm trying to say.
Perfect, yeah. Perfect. We are on the same page here.
Yeah.
I'll share this, I'll finish it for this observed data. And then this is business logic. Yeah.
This is more of a description of your step 7. Am I right, Subhash?
In the step 7, actually, we talk about where we can put the actor.
Okay.
So it's like BIM has articulated the entire loop, like where the business logic, what data, how it will collect it. So you remember initially we had 4 things. We were talking about what,
Yes.
how, when.
Yes.
So that role is clearly segregated actually in this diagram. Like
Right.
if I go to my slide, yeah. So the first thing, what need to be observed. So that is decided by the service assurance. How it should be observed, that will be decided by observability. And when to correlate or trigger, again, it's a mix and match of observability and SA. Because the condition would be there in the observability is when to stream that particular scenario, and that configuration happens via the SA but. And what action need to be taken? So that would be done by service assurance. So these are the what, how, when, what.
Right. Here now, one interesting point related to what Tim also suggested, the analytics module, right? See, it's not going to be a very simple action, right? Sometimes it may involve, okay, if this problem exceeds, you need to touch these 3 NFs. And
Right.
that relations, you remember? So
Yeah,
those are
yes.
in SA analytics module. I mean, analysis, not analytics module. This correlation, all those stuffs.
Correlation,
Analysis.
yeah.
Okay.
So that we might be having under the business logic, like which NFs do we choose to configure. So somewhere we need to capture that logic in a business logic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In that case, I think it answers Tim's complete flow. Am I right, Tim?
Yeah.
Yes. This is exactly what I would have thought, right? So
Yeah.
just as long as we understand what the contract is between the service assurance and observability, right, in terms of the information flow that you're talking about here, just what Wim's got. Go ahead and now, Stephen, now I understand. Now I at least know the context that you got everything in. Because before I was looking at it going, hang on, guys. I'm only seeing acting, right? From the based upon what came out of observability. Okay. All right. So sorry, Stephen. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was like going, hang on.
No. So I'm pretty much done anyway. so yeah, as Wim said, I mean, we provide data, context of data. We can kind of talk about that. So we'll give you the right thing, or at least give you a library call that you can use a querying string to query the right thing, or subscribe to the right thing. But it's not interpreting data. We don't analyze the data.
Okay.
And then at this point,
and you're actually are you guys using OTel as your framework? Just curious.
That's we are leaning towards, yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry guys to interrupt. I think we have crossed already 7 minutes from our end time. So would you like to continue the discussion, or is that
No, I need to go on to another meeting actually. So.
Yeah, let's do it next week.
But yeah, thank you for sharing these ideas and feedbacks. We'll keep continuing next week also. And thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.